On the first Sunday in October, my stepson Dale stood in the doorway of my room at the care center, holding his truck keys, and asked me whether the new furnace he had put in my house was keeping me warm enough at night. I told him I had not slept in that house in 326 days, and that no such furnace had ever existed anywhere except in whatever he had just said. He laughed. It was a small laugh, the kind a man gives a dog that has brought him the wrong stick, and then he started talking about the weather. But I have spent 59 years being paid to hear one thing go slightly wrong underneath a lot of things going right, and that laugh was wrong all the way down. A man does not put a furnace in a house he means to let go of. So either Dale had lied to me about a furnace, which made no sense, or he had lied about something a great deal larger, and either way he had 39 days left to finish it. My name is Ivar Sundquist. I am 78. I will be 79 in March if the winter behaves itself. The house I grew up old in sits at the far end of Brackenridge Road, out where the county quits maintaining the pavement and the gravel takes over, in Tillicum County, Oregon, and I have paid the tax on it every year since 1975. I worked 22 years at the plywood plant in Fernhill, but that is not what I am. Since 1967 I have tuned pianos, and after the plant went down in '89 I did nothing else. 4 counties. Churches, mostly. School gymnasiums, grange halls, 2 funeral homes, 1 tavern with a spinet that should have been burned in 1955. There are maybe 400 pianos between the Coast Range and the Valley that have my pencil mark on the inside of the lid. Before I take you back to the beginning of this, do one small thing for me, because it is going to matter later. Leave me a road name in the comments, whatever road your own bed is sitting on tonight. Not the number on the mailbox. The name. Somebody named that road, usually after a family that is not up there anymore, and say whether it is light or dark outside your window while you are listening, because I am going to spend the next hour on what it means to sleep in your own house, and I would like to know how many of you are doing it tonight. Now, 2 things about my trade, and then I will get to the falling down. The first is this. A piano does not go out of tune. It goes out of tune with itself. The strings do not all drift the same direction at the same speed. The ones in the middle, where the family plays, hold better because they get used. The ones out at the ends go quietly. What you end up with is an instrument that sounds perfectly fine to the people who live with it, because they have been listening to it change one hair at a time for 11 years, and their ears moved right along with it. Nobody has ever once called me because their piano sounded wrong. Not one time, in 59 years. They call me because somebody visited. A daughter comes home at Christmas and sits down and plays 8 bars and stops and does not say anything, and on Monday the phone rings. Hold on to that. Everything that saved me in this story was somebody visiting. The second thing is the pin block, and I want you to picture it, because I have never found a better way to say what happened to my family. Under the strings and the plate and everything you can see, there is a slab of hard maple laminated up in layers with the grain crossed. Every tuning pin in that instrument is driven into that block, and the only reason a piano stays where you put it is friction. Wood squeezing steel. There is no lock and no mechanism. You cannot see a pin block, and when one starts to go, from dry air or 80 years of a wood stove 12 feet away, the piano does not break. That is the thing. Every note still speaks. It sounds like a piano to anybody in the room. It just will not hold. You tune it and it is beautiful and you drive home, and in 9 days it has crawled right back, and there is nothing you can do but tell the truth to the person who owns it, which is a conversation I have had in about 60 front rooms and never once gotten good at. My family still played. Every note still spoke. For 3 years, my family sounded exactly like a family to anybody in the room. It just was not holding, and I was the one man in 4 counties who was supposed to be able to hear that, and I did not. Ilse would have heard it. My wife heard everything, 4 years before anybody else did, which made her exhausting to live with and impossible to live without. She died on the 9th of March in the year 2015, at home, in the front room, 69 years old, with the window cracked open because she wanted the creak. We had 38 years, and I still cannot say her name at a normal volume. She came to me with a boy already attached to her. Dale was 7. His father was a man down in Klamath Falls who sent a card for about 3 Christmases and then quit. And I want to be plain here because it matters at the end. I never once thought of that boy as belonging to somebody else. I taught him to drive on the mill road. I paid for his braces and half of his first truck. When he stood up at Ilse's service and could not get through the second sentence of what he had written, I walked up and finished it for him. If you are waiting for me to say I always had a bad feeling about Dale, you will wait a long time. I did not. That is the honest part of this, and it is the part that cost me the most. There is one more thing from before, and it is small, and it is the only object in this story worth remembering. In 1967, a woman named Mrs. Ordway, who taught piano in the front room of a house on Ridley Street, and who was the first person to tell me I had an ear, gave me a tuning fork. Steel, about 5 inches, A above middle C, 440 vibrations a second. It is not valuable. You can buy one today for the price of a sandwich. I have used it on every instrument I have touched since, and I do the same thing in every room and have never skipped it once. Before I open the lid, before I say hello to the piano at all, I strike it on my knee and press the stem to the bone behind my ear and shut my eyes and listen to it alone for about 4 seconds. Not to check the fork. The fork is fine. The fork is always fine. I do it to check me. My ears have been out in the world all week listening to trucks and weather and people talking, and they have drifted, and I do not get to know that from the inside. So I hold a thing that cannot drift against my skull until my head remembers what the truth sounds like, and then I go to work. Ilse watched me do that 10,000 times. She said one thing about it. Once, drying a dish, in about 1980, she said, "That is the only object in this house that has never had an opinion. I taught Dale to strike it when he was 11. He had a better ear than I did, and it is one of the small griefs of my life that he never did one thing with it. Now, the 11th of November, 2 winters back, we had a hard freeze and then a warm rain, which on this coast means every surface in the world turns to glass and nobody admits it. I went out the back at 6:30 in the morning, in the dark, in ordinary rubber boots, because I was going 20 feet for stove wood. 4 steps down the ramp, and my right foot went, and the rest of me followed it. I was on that concrete a little over an hour before Lyle Petronek came up the drive. Lyle is 80, mostly deaf on the right side, retired millwright, and he was bringing me back a bar clamp he had borrowed in August. If he had decided to bring it Wednesday instead of Tuesday, I would not be talking to you. Broken hip. They flew me to Portland. Dr. Sethi put a rod in the femur and told me it had gone the way he wanted, and that I would walk, and he was right on both counts. He also told me that at my age the bone is not the danger. The danger is the 3 weeks after, lying still, and that I needed to be somewhere with a therapy gym and a nurse. All of which was true. That is what makes this hard to explain to people. Dale drove down from Fernhill and handled everything, and I want to say that clearly. He handled everything and I was grateful, and I was on the kind of medication where the ceiling tiles seemed to be breathing. There was a stack of paperwork. There is always a stack. Hospital, admission, insurance. He sat on the edge of the bed with it on his knee and read me the top line of each page, and I signed, and I did not read one word of any of it. I am not going to make myself sound careful. I was 76 years old with a rod in my leg, and a man I raised was holding out a pen and telling me it was for the therapy people. 2 of those pages were a power of attorney for my finances. That one I did know about, and fairness cost me nothing here. He said it in plain English, that if a bill came to the house while I was down there, somebody had to be able to pay it. I said fine, and I meant fine. That is not the crime. Half of you listening have signed one, and you were right too. A power of attorney is a hammer. It is not a weapon, and nobody is doing you a favor by handing you one. The only question that ever mattered is who is holding it and what they do with it when you are not in the room. They moved me to Cedar Reach on the 11th of November, a rehabilitation and care center on the north edge of Fernhill, 22 minutes from my house. I will be fair about that building too. The food was ordinary. The floors were clean. The aides were young and mostly kind, and paid about what you would expect, which is to say, not enough. Dale told me 6 weeks. That was the number. 6 weeks, and then home. At 6 weeks, the therapist said I needed more time on the stairs, which was true. At 10 weeks, she said the same thing, and it was still true. Somewhere in there, she quit saying a number and started saying we were doing great. By spring, nobody said a number at all, and I did not ask. I had gotten into the habit of not being a bother. Here is what I noticed in July, and did nothing about until October. In 8 months in that building, I did not receive one piece of mail, not a bill, not a bank statement. Not a coupon book from the tire place. Not the seed catalog that has come to my house every January since Ilse ordered from them in 1981. Nothing. Not one envelope. I told myself the front desk was slow. I told myself it was piling up at home and Dale was watching it. And then on the first Sunday in October, a man I raised stood in my doorway and lied to me about a furnace. And I lay awake that night and finally let myself ask the question I had been walking around for 4 months. If nobody is sending me anything, who is opening it? People expect the old man to get angry, to call his daughter, to roll down the hall and demand to see somebody. I did not, and it was not wisdom, and it was not courage. It was a habit I got from the work. You do not argue with a room. A woman tells you her piano is fine, and her mother played it, and it has always sounded like that, and you do not stand in her front room and contradict her, because she is not wrong about anything she can hear. You take the reading. You write the pitch on the card in pencil with the date on it. And if there is ever an argument later, the card is there, and you are not in it. The card does the arguing. That is what the card is for. So on the 6th of October, I did not get angry. I got boring. Up until then, I had been a quiet resident, but a slightly difficult one. The kind who says no thank you to the activities and eats in his room. Starting that Monday, I became the easiest man in that building. I went to bingo. I let the girl from the beauty room cut my hair. I ate in the dining room with a retired school bus driver named Ozzie Hallquist, who told me the same 3 stories about a bear every week, and I laughed at the bear every week. And I meant it, because it is a decent bear story. If Dale came on a Sunday, I asked about his trucks. I did not ask about my house. Because here is a thing I learned early. You never tell anybody what you are listening for. The second a man knows you are listening, he starts helping. And once he starts helping, you cannot hear anything at all. The first person who gave me anything was Delphine Ruiz, the night charge nurse on that hall. 40-something, from Woodburn, with the flat, unhurried way about her that the good ones have. She came in at about 10:30 one night that week to check my leg, and she said something I do not think she knew she was saying. She said, "Mr. Sundquist, you are the only one on this hall who never gets any mail." I asked her how she knew that. She said she carries the cart down at 4 o'clock and has been doing it 6 years, and she notices. Mr. Hallquist gets 11 pieces a week from 3 churches and a casino. The woman in 12 gets nothing but drugstore advertisements. I get nothing at all. And she had thought it was sad, and then she had thought it was strange, and she had never said anything because it was not her business. I asked her when the last time was. She thought about it and said she could not remember one. Ever. I said good night and lay there in the dark until the heat came on at 4. The second thing came off a wall. There is a poster in the corridor between the dining room and the therapy gym, laminated, sun-faded, and every resident in this country has walked past one without ringing it. It is the list of resident rights. I had gone by that poster 900 times. That week, I read it. All of it. Standing there with my walker. Twice. Because there was a line in the middle of it that stopped me cold. It said, I had the right to manage my own financial affairs. Under that, it said I had the right to receive my mail unopened. Under that, it said I had the right to leave. I stood in that hallway a long time. It had never occurred to me, not once in 11 months, that I was in that building the way a man is in his own truck rather than the way a man is in a jail. Nobody had lied to me about it. I had simply gotten so used to asking permission for a second cup of coffee that I had quietly filed myself under things that are decided by other people. If you are in a building like that tonight, or you have somebody in one, that poster is not decoration. Read the whole thing. It took me 11 months, and it should have taken me 11 minutes. The third thing I got from a 23-year-old named Corey Tran, who runs the activity room on weekday afternoons and keeps a desktop computer in there on a rolling cart. I sat down across from him on the 14th of October and said I wanted to look at the county assessor's website. He said, "Sure, whose property?" I said mine. He typed my name in and turned the screen so I could see it. And there it was, the way it has been my whole adult life. Tax lot number, 11.5 acres. Improvements, 1 dwelling, built 1942. Assessed value, taxes paid, current. And then Corey scrolled down past all of that to the part I had never had any reason to look at in my life. The part that lists the documents recorded against the property. And he said, "Huh." And he stopped scrolling. What he had stopped on was a link. The assessor keeps the value of a place. The county clerk keeps the paper. There was a line at the bottom of the assessor page that said recorded documents, and Corey clicked it. and it took us over to the clerk's index, which is nothing but a list. Date, document type, names, instrument number. The oldest one was from 1975. A warranty deed. Ilsa and me buying 11.5 acres from a widow named Verna Skoog. Under it, a deed of trust, because we had a mortgage like everybody has a mortgage. Under that, 1988, a full reconveyance, which is the paper the county records when a man finishes paying. I remember the night we made the last payment. We ate at a steakhouse that is a tire shop now, and Ilsa ordered a drink with an umbrella in it because she thought it was funny. And then nothing on that list for 35 years. Nothing, which is exactly right, because for 35 years, nothing happened to that house except roofs and paint, and one very bad winter with the well. And then there was a line dated the 6th of June, 3 years ago. Deed of trust. Grantor, Ivar M. Sundquist. Beneficiary, a lender in Michigan whose name meant nothing to me and never had. And under that, a second one recorded the same day. Same lender, second deed of trust. I sat there and looked at the screen, and I felt the floor of that activity room tilt about 2 degrees. Corey wanted to know if I needed some water, and I told him no. And then I asked whether he could print it, and he said the printer was in the office, but he could take a picture of the screen with his phone, and he did. I said, Corey, do those say what I think they say? He said he did not know much about it. He said his aunt had one on her place in Salem. He said the two of them together, recorded on the same day like that, usually meant it was a reverse mortgage. I want to stop here and be careful, because a lot of you have heard that phrase and about half of you have heard something wrong about it. And this is the part of my story that is actually useful to somebody. A reverse mortgage is a loan, that is all it is. It is not a program, and it is not a benefit, and nobody is giving you anything. If you are 62 or older and your house is paid off, a lender will lend you money against it. You make no monthly payments. The interest and the fees pile up on top of what you took, and the whole thing comes due when the last borrower dies or sells or moves out. The government insures the common kind, which is why 2 documents get recorded instead of 1. There are people it genuinely helps. I have known 2. It is not a swindle by itself. But here is what makes it different from every other loan a man can sign, and why a certain kind of person goes looking for it. On a regular mortgage, if you keep paying, nobody cares whether you are home. On this one, the house has to be your principal residence. Not your house, not your address, the place you actually sleep. Every year the servicer sends a certification, and you sign it and send it back saying, yes, I still live here. And if you are gone from that house more than 12 months in a row, for any reason at all, including a hospital and including a nursing home, the lender can call the whole loan due and payable. 12 months in a row. I had been at Cedar Reach since the 11th of November. I did that arithmetic sitting in a plastic chair in an activity room with a bingo cage on the shelf behind me, and I did it twice because I did not believe it the first time. The 14th of October was day 337, 28 days. I asked Corey to go back one screen. I asked him to read me the recording date on that deed of trust again, and he did. The 6th of June, 3 years ago. 3 years ago in June, I was 75 years old. I had not fallen yet. I had 2 good hips and I was still cutting my own firewood and driving myself to Fernhill for coffee on Saturday mornings. And I sat there in that chair and I searched my whole memory, every week of that whole summer, for a lender, a signing, a closing, a notary, a man with a briefcase, anything. There was nothing. There is nothing. There has never been anything. I have never in my life borrowed $1 against that house since 1988, and I could not tell you the name of that Michigan lender if you held a gun on me. Corey clicked one more time on the document itself, and a scanned image came up, gray and crooked, the way those scans always are. It was 11 pages. On the last page there was a signature line, and above it, in blue ink, was my name. It was not a forgery. I want you to hear that, because it is the single strangest thing about this whole business, and it is the thing that took me longest to understand. It was not traced, and it was not copied. It was not somebody's idea of what my handwriting looks like. It was mine, my hand, the way the R in Ivar runs downhill because of the tendon in my thumb. I had signed it. I just had no idea on God's earth when a tuning comes out somewhere it has no business being. There is exactly one honest move, and it is not a comfortable one. You go back to the fork, not to the note you just set. not to the octave above it, all the way back to the one thing in the room that cannot have moved. And then you come forward again from there, one string at a time, writing down everything, including the things you already know. Because the piano is not lying, your ear is. So that night I asked the aide for paper, and she gave me what they had, which was a stack of activity calendars from the summer, printed on one side. Big squares, Bingo Tuesday, Hymn Sing Sunday, and on the blank backs of those calendars, over 4 nights, I came forward from the fork. I wrote it the way I have written a service card for 59 years. Date, what I found, what I did, what I could swear to, and what I could not. And on the second night, somewhere around 1 in the morning, with the hall lights down and the ice machine going, I got to the 6th of June 3 years ago, and it came back to me. It came back all at once, the way they do. There had been a Saturday, early summer. Dale came up the road at about 10 in the morning with a woman in a blue car behind him, and he introduced her by a first name I never did catch, and she had a leather folder and a stamp. We sat at my kitchen table, Ilse's table, the one with the burn mark by the sugar bowl. There was a plate of store cookies on it because that is what Dale had brought, and he explained it to me. I will give you his words, because I have had a long time with them, and I have never once caught him in a lie that day. He said, "This is so. The place does not have to go through the court when you die. That is the whole thing," he said. He said it once, plainly, in his mother's kitchen, and it is the truest false sentence I have ever heard. Not one word of it is a lie. A house with a loan against it and no equity left does not have much of anything to go through a court with. He told me the outcome, and let me build the reason for it myself, and I built it, and I built it wrong, and I signed 11 pages while a plate of store cookies went stale. I did not read them, not one line. I am not going to make myself sound careful, but here is what I have made my peace with. There was one thing that day that was supposed to catch this. One, it was not me, and it was not that notary, because a notary only swears that the man signing is the man he says he is, and I was. I did not know about it yet on the 16th of October. I found out 2 weeks later in a lawyer's office, from a woman reading a telephone number off a piece of paper. Hold on to that. The next thing I did was call Lyle Petronik from the phone at the nurse's station, and Lyle drove out. Now, Lyle was a millwright at the plywood plant for 31 years, which means he spent 3 decades being the man they woke up at 2 in the morning when the dryer quit. He is deaf on one side, and he drives a 1994 flatbed, and he has exactly one facial expression. He sat down in the chair by my window with his hat in his lap, and I told him the whole thing straight through, and he did not interrupt me once. And when I was done, he sat there for a while. Then he said, "What do you need?" I said I needed to know what was in my mailbox. He drove up Bracken Ridge that afternoon and called me from his kitchen at about 5. He said the mailbox at the end of my drive was empty. Not empty the way a box is empty on a Tuesday. Empty and clean, with a wasp nest in the top corner, the way a box is empty when nothing has come to it in a very long time. He said the house looked all right from outside. He said the grass had been cut, which surprised me, and there was a hose reel on the porch he did not recognize. And he said, "Ivar, there is no new furnace." I looked in the window. "It is your same oil furnace, same cream color it has been since Ilse was alive." I thanked him, and hung up, and sat on the edge of that bed a good while, because you understand what the grass meant. Somebody was going up there. Somebody was keeping that place looking exactly like a house where an old man lives, just not one where he gets any mail. Tuesdays at Cedar Reach. A woman named Harriet Vandehay comes in at about 1 in the afternoon with a canvas bag and a name tag she has clearly had for years. She is a certified ombudsman volunteer. Every state has this, and almost nobody knows it. She is not employed by the building, and she is not employed by the county. She works out of an office whose whole job is to be on the resident's side, and she is allowed to walk into any long-term care facility in this state and sit down with any resident who asks, in private, with the door shut, and the building cannot stop her and cannot sit in on it. I had been passing that woman in the hallway for 11 months, and I had assumed she was somebody's aunt. On the 21st of October, I asked her for 10 minutes. I gave her the calendar pages. She read them a long time without saying anything, which I appreciated, and then she asked me 3 questions. The first was whether anyone had ever told me I could not leave. I thought about it honestly and said no. Nobody ever had. Not one person in that building had ever said that word to me. The second was what my doctor thought about it, and I said I did not know, because I had not asked him in about 7 months. The third one took the floor out. She said, "Mr. Sundquist, who signs your paperwork here?" I said my stepson does. She said, "Does he sign it as your representative, or does he sign it because he has been telling this building that you cannot sign it yourself?" I did not have an answer. I had never thought about there being a difference. She said there is an enormous difference, and she said it very quietly, and she wrote something in a spiral notebook. She could not give me legal advice, and she could not undo a document. What she could do was help me get copies of my own records, which are mine, and make sure nobody in that building put a hand on my elbow when I decided to walk out of it. And then came the sentence I have handed to about 40 people since. She said, "A facility can recommend anything it wants. But unless a judge has said otherwise, you are an adult in Oregon, and an adult can go home." Then she helped me ask for my own admission file. Not fight for it. Ask. It took 9 days and one follow-up. Two things came out of it. The first was an admission packet from the 11th of November of the previous year, with a line on it for the resident's mailing address. And the address on that line was not Bracken Ridge Road. It was a post office box in Fernhill, Box 471. I have never rented a post office box in my life. The second was a form I did not understand until Harriet explained it. A change of address, filed with the Postal Service, dated the 11th of June, 3 years ago, 5 days after the deed of trust was recorded. Everything addressed to Ivar Sundquist at 11 miles up Bracken Ridge Road went to Box 471 in Fernhill and had been going there for 3 years and 4 months. The seed catalog, the tire coupons, the property tax statement, every annual notice that Michigan lender had ever mailed me. Now I want to tell you about my daughter, because this is where she comes back in, and she deserves better than to be a footnote in her own father's story. Nora is 52. She runs the parts counter at a farm equipment dealer in Yakima, Washington, and she has her mother's flat way of asking a question. She called me at Cedar Reach maybe 6 times in 11 months, which sounds thin, and I had made a whole quiet peace with it. I had decided my daughter was busy. I had decided that was the natural order of things. On the 24th of October, I called her and asked her, straight out, why she had not come. There was a silence on that line that I will hear for the rest of my life. She said, "Dad, I have driven out there twice. The first time was in April." She got to the front desk and they were pleasant to her, and told her that per the family contact on file, visits had to be arranged in advance because you were having a hard week. She waited an hour and a half in that lobby and then drove 7 hours home. The second time was in July. They were pleasant again. That time she was told that you had said you did not want visitors. I had never said that to a living soul. We were both quiet a while and then my daughter started to cry, and I sat in a room in Fernhill, Oregon holding a phone against my good ear and understood that I had spent 11 months feeling forgotten by a woman who had spent 11 months feeling shut out, and that a man I raised had stood in the doorway between us the whole time, telling each of us one small polite thing about the other. That is the wound that has not closed, not the money. The money is arithmetic, and arithmetic can be argued in an office. He took a year off of me and my girl with 2 sentences to a receptionist, and there is no court in this country that gives that back. Nora came out on the 26th and she brought a lawyer's name, and on the 27th of October, we sat in front of a woman named Vivian Trask in a small office on Bay Street in Fernhill, with the tally sheets spread out on her desk. If you have come this far with an old man on a Sunday, subscribe, and then stay with me for about 4 more minutes, because everything I have told you so far, I found out by counting. What Vivian Trask found in one telephone call was the thing I never would have found on my own. And it is the reason this story has an ending, instead of just a sad middle. Vivian Trask is about 60, and she has a small office with a window unit and a photograph of a dog that has been dead a long time. She read the tally sheets. She looked at the recorded documents. She did not say anything reassuring, which I liked. And then she said, "Before we do anything at all, I want to see one thing." I asked her what. She said, "On this kind of loan, there is a step that has to happen before a lender is even allowed to take your application. You sit down with an independent counselor, somebody approved by the federal housing people, who does not work for the lender and has nothing to gain either way. They go through the whole thing. What it costs. What happens if you go into a nursing home. What it means for your children. At the end, they issue a certificate with a number on it, and without that certificate, there is no loan," she said. That step exists because of exactly the situation you are describing. It is the one place in the whole process where somebody is supposed to be alone with you. I asked if she could get it. She said the lender has it in the file, but there was something better. The counseling agency keeps its own records, independently, for years, and they are required to. It took her 3 days and one release with my signature on it, and on the 30th of October she called me at Cedar Reach and read it to me over the phone while I sat in the chair by the window with a pencil. She said, "Your counseling session took place by telephone on Thursday, the 18th of May, 3 years ago, beginning at 9:40 in the morning. It ran 38 minutes. The counselor was a man in Vancouver, Washington. His notes say the client was engaged and asked good questions about the growth rate on the line of credit." I said, "Vivian, I have never spoken to that man." She said, "I know, because the intake sheet lists a callback number," and she read it to me. "I have known that number since about 1996. It is the landline at the shop on Cutter Road, where Pruitt Hauling keeps 3 log trucks and a parts counter and a coffee maker that has never once been cleaned. It was Dale's phone. Sit with the shape of that. Somebody spent 38 minutes on a telephone on a Thursday morning being me, answering questions as me, asking good questions about the growth rate as me, to a man in Vancouver whose entire job that morning was to make sure that Ivar Sundquist, 75 years old, up Bracken Ridge Road, understood what he was about to do. And Ivar Sundquist, 75 years old, was not there. I know exactly where I was, and that is the only good luck in this whole story. On the 18th of May, 3 years ago, I was on the Sable River with Lyle Petronek in a 16-foot boat from 4 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, because it was spring Chinook season and had been for 3 weeks, and we went every Thursday we could stand up. I have the tag. In this state, when you keep a spring Chinook, you punch your tag, and the punch has a date on it. And I turned that tag in that fall, the way you are required to. Lyle keeps a logbook of every trip he has made since 1981, and his entry for that day says the water was 3 feet high and off color, and we got one fish and lost one at the boat. I have never owned a cellular telephone. There is no service in that canyon anyway. So, no, I was not on the phone. Vivian kept reading, because there was more, and this is the part that put me on my feet in that room with a bad hip. She said, "There is an intake sheet. Age, income, marital status. Under marital status it says widowed, and then she said the year. Whoever was on that phone told a stranger in Vancouver, Washington that my wife died in the year 2009. Ilse died on the 9th of March in the year 2015. Dale carried one end of her casket. Dale stood up in the Lutheran church on Ridley Street and could not get through the second sentence of what he had written down. He got her year wrong. Not because he forgot. You do not forget that. He got it wrong because he was not remembering. He was reading off a note he had made for himself with the answers on it, and he got one of them wrong, the way a man does when he is nervous and moving fast and has a lot of columns to keep straight. I have thought about that note more than I have thought about the $241,600. Somewhere in this county 3 years ago, a man I raised sat down at a table and wrote out a list of facts about my life so he could say them out loud to a stranger convincingly. My birthday, my income, my dead wife. And then he practiced. I hung up and sat in that chair a while, and then I came apart, in front of a witness, for the first time since 1979. Delphine Ruiz found me, and did not say anything about it. She put her hand flat on my back between the shoulder blades and left it there, the way you would with a horse, and after a while she asked if I wanted the light on. I said no. I said leave it off for a bit. The next morning I told Vivian Trask I wanted to drive to Cutter Road and put the whole thing on the parts counter in front of him. She let me finish, and then she asked me a question that I have since used on myself about 9 times. She said, "What do you want? And do not tell me what you want him to feel." I sat with that, and what came out of my mouth was, "I want to sleep in my own bed before the 11th of November." She said, "Then that is the whole job, and everything else is a second job that can wait." Here is what she told me over the next 2 days, and I am going to give it to you the way she gave it to me, without the parts that are only about my family. The line of credit had been drawn down over 3 years and 1 month, in 22 separate advances, never the whole thing at once, $241,600, with the interest riding on top of it, And the insurance premium on top of that. The payoff by that October was near 294,000. My place, 11 and a half acres with a 1942 house on it, would bring maybe 410 in that market. So there was equity left. That surprised me. I had assumed the point was to eat the whole thing. Vivian said no. She said, look at the shape of it. The day that loan is called due and payable, the house gets sold. The lender takes what it is owed. What is left comes back to you, into an account, and there is a power of attorney on that account with his name on it. And then she said the sentence that changed how I understood the last 3 years of my life. She said, but the money is not the point of selling it. Once that house is gone, there is no address. And a man with no address does not get mail, no property tax statement, no annual notice from Michigan, no certification arriving every June asking Ivar Sundquist to please confirm that he still lives here. No document in the world with my name and a place on it, ever again. Just an old man in a small apartment somewhere with a checkbook somebody else balances. That is not a robbery. A robbery ends. That is a fence. As for where the money went, I did not have to guess long, because most of it is parked in plain sight along Cutter Road. Pruitt Hauling lost the mill contract 2 summers before all this, to a bigger outfit out of Roseburg. Dale kept 3 trucks and 2 drivers running on spot loads that do not pay, and he refinanced the shop. And there was a comp claim from a man who hurt his back throwing chain. And in the middle of it, his daughter Kit, who is 19 and who used to sit on my kitchen counter eating the frosting off the cinnamon rolls, went into a residential program in Bend that runs $11,000 a month. Insurance covered 28 days. She has now been there 4 times. I am not telling you that to excuse 1 minute of it. I am telling you because I promised at the beginning that I would be honest. And the honest thing is that the first $11,000 he took to keep his daughter alive. It is the next 230 that I have questions about. Vivian filed nothing that week, and that was the hardest part for me. Every instinct I had said freeze the account, call the lender, get a stop put on something. She said absolutely not, and she was right. She said, right now he believes you are exactly where he left you. The second he learns otherwise, he has one move, and it is not to run. His move is to go to a judge and say his stepfather is confused and needs a guardian. She said, do not hand him a reason to look reasonable. So we did it the slow way. Harriet made a referral to Adult Protective Services with my say-so. And a woman from the state came out on the 2nd of November and sat with me 2 hours and never once talked to me like I was a child. Vivian pulled the loan file, the servicing notes, and every occupancy certification the lender had on record. There were 3 of them, one for each year. All 3 returned on time. All 3 signed. And not one of those 3 signatures was mine. He forged the small ones. He had my real signature on the big one, because he earned that with cookies and one true sentence at my wife's kitchen table. And then every June after that, for a form nobody ever looks at twice, he just wrote my name himself. That is the whole shape of the man in one line, and I did not enjoy learning it. Then, on the 3rd of November, Cedar Reach called me to the desk to let me know that my family had requested a care conference. If you have not been through one, a care conference is a regular thing. Everybody sits in the small dining room. The nurse, the therapist, the social worker, the administrator, the family. They go over the plan. It is not a trial. It is usually about shoes and appetite. The girl at the desk was reading off a screen and she was perfectly pleasant about it. And she told me the purpose listed on the request. Recommendation for transfer to the memory care unit. I knew that unit. Everybody in that building knows that unit. It is at the end of the West Hall behind a door with a keypad on it. And it is full of people who are loved and who are not coming back. And the door does not open from the inside. The conference was set for the 7th of November. The 11th of November was 4 days after that. I want to tell you how a 78-year-old man with a rod in his leg gets out of a building like that, because it is not the way it happens in a movie, and the real way is better. He asks. On the 3rd of November, I called Dr. Sethi's office in Portland. I had not spoken to that man in 7 months. His nurse called me back within the hour and put him on, and I told him what I wanted and why. And I left out the money because I did not want him deciding I was excited. He asked me 4 questions. Could I get from a bed to a chair on my own? Could I get up a flight of stairs with a rail? Was there anybody in the house at night? Did I have a way to call for help? I said yes, yes. My daughter is coming for 2 weeks, and I will have the phone by the bed. He said, Then go home, Mr. Sundquist. He said he would send a discharge order and a referral for home therapy twice a week, and then he said one more thing I did not expect. He said, I should have asked you about this in the spring. Nobody in that building fought me. Say that out loud with me, because I have made the place sound like a fortress and it was not one. When I told the social worker on the 4th that I was going home on the 5th, she went and got the discharge packet and sat down and helped me fill it out. And at one point, she looked at the family contact line and then at me and said, do you want to change this? And I said, yes, I do. Nora drove down from Yakima and got in at 9 at night on the 4th. Lyle came in the morning with his flatbed because my walker would not go in a car trunk. Ozzie Hallquist waited by the front door in his chair to shake my hand, and Delphine Ruiz was not even on shift and came in anyway on her own time in a sweatshirt. I left through the front doors at 11:20 in the morning on the 5th of November. Nobody stopped me. Nobody had ever been going to. The house smelled like a closed house. That cold, still, mineral smell. Nora went around opening windows, and I stood in the front room a while and looked at the place where the bed had been. In March, in the year 2015, the grass was cut. There was a hose reel on the porch that was not mine. The power was on, which told me something, and the phone was disconnected, which told me something else. There was a stack of dishes in the drainer that I had left there on the 10th of November of the previous year, and I had been the last person to eat off them. The furnace was the same cream-colored oil furnace it has been since 1984. We had the phone back on by 4. Nora made spaghetti out of a jar because that is what there was. And at about 8 o'clock, with my daughter asleep in her old room, I opened the lid of the upright in the front room. It is a Kimball from 1958 that I bought for Nora when she was 6, and that nobody in this family has played well or often. 11 months, in a cold house with the humidity swinging, is 11 months. It was down about 40 cents, and it sounded like a saloon. My fork was in the shirt pocket of a shirt hanging in my own closet, where I had left it on the 10th of November of the previous year. I struck it on my knee, and I put the stem behind my ear, and I shut my eyes for 4 seconds, the way I have done in 400 front rooms. Then I closed the lid. I did not tune it. My leg would not stand for it, and my hands were not going to be steady for another month. I just wanted to know the fork was still telling the truth in that room. And it was. And then I slept in my own bed on Brackenridge Road on the 5th of November, and that was all of it. That was the entire trick. An old man lying down in a house. Day 359. I want to explain what that did, because it is the closest thing to justice in this story, and it happened while I was asleep. That loan could be called due if I was out of that house for more than 12 consecutive months. Consecutive is the whole word. Consecutive means in a row, without a break, and one night is a break. The clock does not slow down and it does not pause. It goes back to 0. At 9 in the morning, on the 6th of November, Vivian Trask sent a letter to that servicer in Michigan by certified mail, with a copy to the federal housing people, stating that Ivar Sundquist is residing at and occupying the property as his principal residence, with the date and my signature under it, and my own hand this time. She attached the power bill. She attached the discharge order from Portland. She attached a statement from the woman at the state, and one from Dr. Sethi, and one from Lyle Petronek, who is 80, and typed his on a typewriter. And she attached copies of 3 annual certifications the servicer already had in its file, and asked them, in one flat sentence with no adjectives in it, to compare those 3 signatures with the one at the bottom of her letter. The other thing I did that morning I did myself, at the counter in the post office in Fernhill, which took 9 minutes and cost me nothing. I filed a change of address from Box 471, Fernhill, Oregon, to 11 miles up Brackenridge Road. The clerk has known me since she was in high school. She read the form, and then she read my face, and she said, Ivar, has your mail been going to a box? I said it has. She did not say anything else. She just stamped it. 2 days later, the conference at Cedar Reach went ahead exactly as scheduled because I had asked them not to cancel it. The 7th of November, 10 in the morning, the small dining room at Cedar Reach, round table. A plate of shortbread nobody touched. The therapist, the social worker, Delphine on overtime, and the administrator, a careful man named Brant Kessel who chooses his words the way you choose your footing on ice. Harriet Vandehay was there in the chair by the window with her canvas bag, because a resident may bring the ombudsman, and there is not one thing a building can do about it. Nora sat on my left. Vivian Trask sat on my right with a folder she never opened. Dale came in at 2 minutes after with a manila envelope under his arm and a jacket he had not worn since the funeral. He looked at me and he stopped. One step inside the door, and something happened behind his face that I have thought about ever since. It was not fear, it was arithmetic. He was running the numbers, fast, and he was getting an answer he did not like. Then he sat down and said good morning, and asked me how my leg was. Brant Kessel opened his laptop and read the first item off the screen in the voice of a man reading a delay announcement at a small airport. He said, "Before we begin the plan of care, there is an administrative note. Mr. Sundquist's status was changed on the 5th. He completed a planned discharge with physician clearance and home health orders. He has been residing at his own address since that date. He is here this morning at his own request as a guest, and the resident council has no objection." Nobody gasped. Nobody stood up. It was the flattest sentence anybody said all week, and it was the whole thing, Dale said. "That is not possible," Brant Kessel said. It was Wednesday, and turned the laptop around a little, the way you do when you are being polite about a fact. And then, Dale did the thing that ended it. He did not argue with the building. He turned to me and he said, in front of 7 people, "Dad, we talked about this. You know you get confused about dates." The room went very quiet. Vivian Trask did not open her folder. She said one sentence, and she said it to the table and not to him. She said, "We have 3 annual occupancy certifications signed in Mr. Sundquist's name during a period when he was in this building, and none of them are his handwriting. I did not say one word in that room. I want you to know that. I have gone over it 100 times and I am satisfied with it. What I did was reach into my shirt pocket and take out the fork and stand it up on the table in front of me, on its stem, the way you set it down between strings. I did not strike it. There was no need." Dale watched his mother's husband do that 10,000 times at kitchen tables and church benches from the time he was 7 years old, and his whole face went. Everybody else at that table saw an old man put a piece of steel on the tablecloth. He saw the only thing in the house that had never had an opinion. Then a man with a lanyard read the next item, which was about my shoes, and Dale Pruitt sat there and got smaller. The rest of it happened in the parking lot in the rain, which is where the parts that matter always happen. He caught up to me by Lyle's flatbed. He did not have the envelope anymore. He said my name twice, and then he ran out of material, and he stood there in his funeral jacket with the rain coming down on both of us. I put the fork in his hand and closed his fingers on it. 59 years I had carried that thing, Mrs. Ordway put it in my palm in the front room of a house on Ridley Street when Eisenhower was still president. I have never in my life been on a job without it. He looked down at it in the rain and he knew exactly what it was, and he could not look up. I said, "You were 6 days short." That is all I said to him. 6 days. He needed me out of that house until the 11th, and he could not make it 6 more days. And I want to be honest, that on that morning I did not say it kindly. He started to cry, standing up in a parking lot, 45 years old. And then he said the only true thing he had said to me in 3 years. He said, "Do not let Kit hear it from somebody else." I told him I would call her myself, and I did, that Friday. And it was the hardest phone call of my life, including the one where I told Nora about her mother. Here is how it came out, for those of you who need the ending. The loan was never called due. It could not be, because the 12 months never happened. It is still sitting on my place, and I will be paying it down out of the recovery for what is left of my life. The lender's fraud people did their own review and were, I will say this, very quick once they had 3 signatures to look at. Vivian brought a civil action. In this state, there is a specific one for the financial abuse of a vulnerable person. The damages on it are not ordinary damages, and there is a provision for the lawyer's fees, which is the only reason a man in my position can bring it at all. It's settled in June. The shop on Cutter Road is sold. 2 of the trucks are sold. He is paying the rest back at a number that means he will be paying me until he is 71 years old. The district attorney charged him forgery and criminal mistreatment. When they asked me what I wanted, I told them the truth, which is that I did not want that man in a prison. I wanted him working and paying, and I wanted his daughter to have a father with an address. He served 90 days in the county, and he is on probation for 5 years. And there is a piece of paper somewhere saying he may not hold a power of attorney for anyone, ever again. I have not forgiven him. People say that word too easily, and I am not going to hand it to you cheap. What I have done is decide not to spend the years I have left carrying him. Kit came out to the house in April. She has been clean 14 months. She sat on my kitchen counter, which is a thing she has done since she was 4, and asked me if I hated her dad, and I said no, and she asked if I was lying, and I said a little. Now, the useful part, because feeling bad for an old man in Oregon does nothing for anybody. Look at where your mail goes. That is the whole warning. Everything that happened to me was possible because of one form at a post office counter that took somebody 9 minutes to fill out. If you have not seen your own property tax statement with your own eyes in a year, go find out why. If somebody puts papers in front of you and reads you the top line, that is not reading them. Ask for a copy to keep. Anybody honest will hand you one. And if you are ever offered one of these loans against your house, remember there is a counselor in the middle of it whose whole job is to be alone with you. And remember, you are entitled to the record of that conversation with the number on it. I did not know that. It is the thing that saved my house. Understand that I have no training in any of this, and no business advising anybody. Every one of these arrangements is different, and every state is different. Go sit down with a lawyer of your own choosing while you are well, and take somebody with you who has nothing to gain. I got home in November. It rained until April, and then it rained some more, and in October it came in again and stayed the way it does. So on a Tuesday I opened the lid on that Kimball and put it back where it belongs. It took me 4 hours and 2 cups of coffee, and I had to stop twice for my hands. Nobody is going to play it. That is all right. A piano that is right is a different object in a room than a piano that is wrong, whether or not anybody sits down at it. And I would rather live in a house where the thing in the corner is telling the truth. Kit brought the fork back to me in April. She had kept it in a sock in a drawer in Bend for 5 months, and she handed it over at the kitchen door and said she did not think it was hers to have. I strike it about once a week now, not for any piano. I strike it on my knee and hold the stem to the bone behind my ear and shut my eyes and count to 4, and what I am checking is not the steel. Ilsa was right about it. In 59 years that fork has never once been kind to me, and it has never once been wrong, and I have come to believe that in this life those two things are almost always the same.